Hello and welcome to India Business Hour. I'm Archana Salanki. Here are the headlines we're tracking this evening. Sensex and Nifty gained for the 8th straight day to mark the longest winning streak in a year. Nifty reclaims 25,100 after posting the biggest weekly gain in 3 months. Washington sends conciliatory signals to New Delhi. President Donald Trump says it was a big deal to impose 50% tariffs on India, but had to be done as India buys Russian oil. Secretary of State Rubio says India is one of the top relationships the US has in the world today. India and the European Union officials hold negotiations in Delhi for a potential free trade agreement. Look to conclude talks by year-end. India is looking at exporting more labour-intensive goods to EU countries under the FTA. EU is eyeing greater market access for its high-tech goods in India. SEBI chief confirms CNBC TV18 Newsbreak promises to circulate a consultation paper on longer tenure for derivatives. Market regulator also relaxes 25% public float rules for large IPOs, allows life insurers and pension funds to participate in anchor books ahead of IPOs. Retail inflation accelerates marginally in August, rises to over 2% after hitting an 8-year low in July, but comes below CNBC TV18's estimates. Food prices continue to contract. Economists say doors open for RBI to cut rates by up to 50 basis points. India Inc. goes shopping with 100 outbound deals worth $11.5 billion getting sealed in the first 8 months of 2025. Most of the acquisitions are aimed at bolstering global supply chains. Infosys shares rise after the company's board approves its biggest share buyback till date at 18,000 crore rupees. This is twice the size of its previous 3 buybacks. The tender offer price of 1,800 rupees a share is a 20% premium to Thursday's closing price. 3 months since the Air India crash in Ahmedabad killed 260 people, grieving families continue to wait for answers. American law firm Beasley Allen prepares to file lawsuits in the US and the UK. The law firm claims to represent families of over 100 victims. Sushila Karki, the former Chief Justice of Nepal Supreme Court, has been appointed as the interim Prime Minister. The country's president declares an emergency and dissolves the parliament. The Himalayan nation remains tense after a violent anti-corruption stir toppled the government. Prime Minister Modi to visit Manipur tomorrow, over 2 years after the ethnic violence swept the state. The Prime Minister is scheduled to announce new projects in Churachandpur, Kuki stronghold, and Imphal, a Meitei majority region. The visit to Manipur is part of Modi's 3-day trip to northeastern states, Bihar and West Bengal. A founding member of the Association for Democratic Reforms and a pioneer of electoral reforms in India, Jagdeep Chhokar, dies of a heart attack at the age of 81. His organization led the fight to ensure politicians declare pending criminal cases and force the scrapping of electoral bonds through which political parties were getting opaque funding from corporations. All right, let's start with the day's market action. Indian equities extended their winning run for the 8th straight session, making it the longest streak in a year. The Nifty climbed back above the 25,100 mark, rising to a 2-month high. Frontline indices closed firmly in the green, with benchmarks outperforming relatively. On a weekly basis, markets logged their biggest gain in nearly 3 months, rising for the second straight week. Sensex, Nifty and Nifty Bank advanced more than over 1% each, while mid-caps registered gains of over 2%. 39 out of 50 Nifty stocks delivered positive returns this week. From equities to the currency market, the Indian rupee gained about 60 paisa against the dollar after plunging to a record low yesterday, but the rupee remains under pressure. $1 now costs more than 88 rupees. The 10-year bond yields remain largely stable in trade today. The Board of Market Regulator SEBI met in Mumbai today and took some very important decisions. Large IPOs will get more time to comply with the 25% minimum public shareholding norms. Companies with market capitalization between 50,000 to 1 lakh crore rupees will get 5 years instead of the current 3 years to comply with the rules. Companies with market capitalization above 1 lakh crores will get 10 years to comply if public shareholding at the time of listing is below 15%. In another key decision, life insurers and pension funds will now have more room to invest in the anchor book of IPOs. The anchor portion has been increased to 40% from the current limit of 1/3. Of this 1/3 will remain reserved for mutual funds, while the remaining portion will be reserved for life insurers and pension funds. And real estate investment trusts or REITs will be reclassified as equity from the current hybrid status for investment by mutual funds and specialized investment funds. But InvITs will remain classified as hybrid. Addressing the media, SEBI Chairman Tuhin Kanta Pandey confirmed a CNBC TV18 newsbreak. When asked about futures and options, SEBI chief promised to regulate a consultation paper on longer tenure derivatives for public comments.
रोज के रोज की में हम अपना काम करें कि हम रोज यही बताते रहें कि आज हम नहीं बता रहे हैं, कल आएगा। आपको हम बताएंगे। हम जितना सेबी ट्रांसपेरेंटली मीडिया से बात करता है या भारत की जनता से बात करता है, उससे अधिक हम क्या करेंगे। हम हर चीज़ डिसीजन लाने से पहले हम कंसल्टेशन पेपर लाते हैं, उसमें भी हर प्रपोजल पे हम कमेंट लेते हैं, प्रपोजल वाइज लेते हैं, उसके बाद हम उसका अध्ययन करते हैं और फिर हम अपने रेगुलेशंस लाते हैं। तो हम सब तरह के फीडबैक लेते हुए काम करते हैं।
Inflation has accelerated marginally in August by more than 2% after hitting an 8-year low in July. But this is still below the CNBC TV18 estimates, which had predicted a rise of 2.2%. Prices have remained benign now for the last few months, but the RBI has warned of a spike in inflation by the end of this financial year. Food prices continue to contract. Food inflation has been shrinking for the last 3 months, but the pace of contraction was slightly better in August. Vegetable prices remain under pressure, contracting by nearly 16%. But this was also slightly better than the 20% contraction we saw in July. Core inflation, however, remains above 4%.
While CPI has bottomed out at 1.55% in the month of July, the pickup in August on fading base effects is also trailing initial expectations. The sole driver of favorable surprise has been vegetables, which has clocked lower than estimates and remains in deflation zone.
The implication for me is basically, is sort of reinstating the fact that the Reserve Bank is behind the curve. I think to a large extent, the Reserve Bank's last, policy, which sort of indicated that they are largely done for the time being, would be definitely questioned by this number. And as Kanika was mentioning, the next month also looks to be quite benign to us. So overall, excluding the GST rationalizing impact, we are still looking at inflation below 2.5% for the year.
Moving on, the United States President Donald Trump has told Fox News that imposing 50% tariffs on India wasn't easy, but had to be done as they're buying Russian oil. But he refrained from using strong words against India, signaling a more conciliatory stance. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump's ambassador-designate for India, Sergio Gore, has signaled that the president shares an incredible relationship with Prime Minister Modi. Addressing a US Foreign Relations Committee hearing, Gore said India and the US are actively negotiating a trade deal and that India's ties with the US are warmer than India's relations with China. Further, he added that US fully intends to enter India's crude oil, petroleum and LNG markets via the ongoing trade talks. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who was also present at the hearing, said that India remains one of the top relationships for the US. He said that ties between the nations was going through a period of transition which will be resolved soon.
While we might have our moment of hiccups right now, we are on the track of resolving that. Our relationship with the Indian government, with the people of India, extends many more decades, and it's a much warmer relationship than they have with the Chinese. Frankly, they are concerned by Chinese expansionism, and Chinese expansionism is not just on the border of India, it's all over the area. And so we share a lot in common, and we share a lot of the same concerns that other nations in the region do. So should I be confirmed, we will make that a top priority, that India is pulled into our side and away from them. fully intent in these trade talks that are ongoing right now to open the markets to crude oil, petroleum products, liquefied natural gas. You're talking about a population of 1.4 billion individuals there. Their middle class, by our definition, is larger than the entire United States of America. And so we have countless possibilities to expand into those markets, and we fully intend to do that.
India, which is, I would say, one of the top relationships the United States has in the world today in terms of the future of what the world's going to look like. 21st century, the story is going to be written in the Indo-Pacific. In fact, it's so important we've actually changed the name of the combatant command to the Indo-Pacific. India is at the core of that. And we are in a period of extraordinary transition in that relationship with India. We've got some really important issues coming up that we need to work with them on and work through on that implicate what's happening from Ukraine, but also implicate what's happening in the region.
Meanwhile, India and the European Union officials held 13 rounds of trade negotiations in Delhi for a potential free trade agreement. Both the sides are aiming to conclude talks by year-end. Abhimanyu Sharma joins us now with more. Abhimanyu, what are your sources telling you?
FTA negotiations are underway between India and the European Union in New Delhi. European Union's Trade Commissioner and Agriculture Commissioner are in New Delhi. They have had conversations with India's Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal. Both the sides are looking to conclude FTA negotiations by the end of this year. The European Union continues to be an important market for India's labor-intensive exports, many of which have been facing headwinds after 50% tariffs have been imposed by the United States. So clearly, it's going to be a win-win situation for both the sides, as it has been indicated by leaderships from both the sides. The European Union, of course, wants to export several products to India. They look at India as a large market. So both the sides are looking to conclude negotiations by the end of this year, even as 60 to 65% of the chapters have already been finalized.
Right. Thank you, Abhimanyu, for that. Shifting focus now. Shares of Infosys rose in trade after the company's board approved its biggest share buyback of 18,000 crore rupees. The company said that it will be repurchasing 10 crore shares from shareholders through the tender offer route. The offer will be priced at 1,800 rupees a share, and this is a 20% premium to yesterday's closing price. 100 deals valued at $11.5 billion in the first 8 months of 2025. Indian companies are on a shopping spree as they aim to bolster their global presence. Nimesh Shah decodes India Inc.'s deal appetite for us.
India Inc. has been on an acquisition spree in 2025 as well. So that's what the whole number will show up for you. In the first 8 months of 2025, we've seen outbound deals of nearly 100 deals, and that value is nearly $11.5 billion. That's the kind of acquisition the Indian companies have done going abroad. Essentially, this has been done to accelerate India's play in the global supply chain. The targets have been largely to plug that gap. Now, look at the first big size of deals. The latest has been the Tega Industries. They announced a large $1.5 billion deal acquiring Molycorp, which is a Latin American company. That's a $1.5 billion. Tata Motors very recently announced an acquisition of an Italian company for 3.8 billion euros. So that again was a large deal. And Sudarshan Chemical this year closed the very large 127 million euro deal. And by virtue of this, they will become the second largest players in the pigment business globally. So that's the kind of global reach these companies will have. But if you look at the 2025 list, it's across sectors. Big names have done acquisitions. Wipro is in an acquisition of $375 million. Titan, they acquired Damas Jewelry for $280 million. Aurobindo and Natco also did acquisitions worth $250 billion, and all are overseas acquisitions. There are some other places as well, like Seat did an acquisition of $225 million of Cosmo Inc., Sun Pharma, TBO Tech, a small company, but they also went ahead and acquired a company for $125 million. So that's a big list of companies who've gone ahead and done acquisitions and of larger size as well. What are bankers saying? The bankers are seeing this as a lot of mid-sized companies are now in the market, and they're doing a lot of cross-border deals. And one of the reasons for that is the buoyant domestic market. That's been the key reason why they've been able to raise money and acquire assets globally. So the money pushes now with the Indian companies to go out and put out big checks. Now, just to compare with what happened last year, in 2024, the total deal was 121 deals, and that was worth $17 billion. So compared to that, 25, as we've already seen 100 deals and $11.5 billion worth of it. So clearly, it looks like there is a lot of appetite for smaller, mid-sized companies to go out and buy a lot of the global assets. And one of the reasons is the domestic liquidity is so strong that it helps them to have that currency currency power and that stock power as well.
Right. Thank you, Nimesh, for that. Heads of public sector banks met officials from the Finance Ministry to carve out a roadmap for India's banking sector. Shivani Bajaj has the details.
Well, yes, a two-day high-level meeting is being held here in New Delhi between top bankers and the Department of Financial Services, of course, focusing on the long-term growth and the vision of India's banking sector by 2047. And the sources reveal that India is setting an ambitious target for itself. At least 2 public sector banks should become global leaders by making it into the world's top 20 banks by asset size, that too before 2047. This comes amid rising global economic uncertainty, where Indian banks are seen as critical tools to help the country expand into new international markets and strengthen its financial position. Sources also explain that artificial intelligence will be a key driver for the organic growth, helping banks improve services, manage risk, and also reach out to new customers. In addition, they say regulatory reforms are likely to be introduced if needed to remove hurdles and boost the global competitiveness of public sector banks. Currently, India's largest public sector bank, SBI, ranks 43rd globally by asset size, which highlights that the challenges are there ahead of us, but the government is clear and has a clear vision that it has to move up rapidly in the coming decades, at least before 2047, for a Viksit Bharat goal. Back to you.
In global headlines, Sushila Karki, the former Chief Justice of Nepal Supreme Court, has been appointed as the interim Prime Minister. The country's president has declared an emergency and dissolved parliament. The Himalayan nation remains tense after a violent anti-corruption stir toppled the government. As Israel continues to bomb Gaza, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has signed an agreement for an expansion plan that would cut across land that Palestinians seek for a state. Netanyahu warned that there will never be a Palestinian state. This comes after Israel bombed Qatar's capital, Doha, to target Hamas leadership. In a statement backed by the US, the UN Security Council condemned the strikes but did not mention Israel. Meanwhile, Germany has said it will back a UN resolution for a two-state solution to the Israel-Palestine conflict. From one war-torn region to another, Russia has claimed that its forces have taken control of a settlement in Ukraine, along with downing at least 7 Ukrainian drones that were headed to Moscow. Ukrainian President Zelensky has pushed for a tougher response to the suspected Russian drone incursion into Poland from its allies. Poland's foreign minister has said that the UN Security Council will hold an emergency meeting. This comes after Russia violated Polish airspace earlier this week. Brazil's former president Jair Bolsonaro has been sentenced to 27 years and 3 months in jail for plotting a military coup. The Supreme Court held him guilty of leading a conspiracy aimed at overturning the results of the 2022 presidential elections after he lost to leftist Lula da Silva. However, Bolsonaro denied wrongdoing and has been under house arrest since last month. His ally, US President Donald Trump, condemned the conviction as a terrible thing. Utah's governor has said that a suspect in connection with influential Republican commentator Charlie Kirk's assassination has been arrested. He identified the man as Tyler Robinson. The FBI had earlier released a video of Kirk's murder suspect. In the footage, a young man was seen wearing a cap and sunglasses and was captured walking down a stairwell of a building. Coming up after this break, 3 months since the Air India crash in Ahmedabad killed 260 people, grieving families continue to wait for answers. American law firm Beasley Allen prepares to file lawsuits in the US and the UK. Details when we return. Welcome back. It's been 3 months since the Air India plane crash in Ahmedabad killed 260 people. With grieving families are continuing to wait for answers. American law firm Beasley Allen is preparing to file lawsuits in the US and the UK. Madiha Mujawar joins us now with more. Madiha, take us through what you're picking up.
Air India says that interim compensation has been released to the families of 207 of the 229 deceased passengers as well as the 19 victims on the ground so far. Remaining families are yet to submit their documents required for the claim. The delay could be due to differences within the family on the distribution of compensation. We have spoken to some families where all the deceased have not received the compensation of 25 lakh rupees due to such differences among family members. The Tata Group, which owns Air India, had separately announced 1 crore rupees compensation to be disbursed through a dedicated trust. In August, the group formally registered the AI 171 Memorial and Welfare Trust. However, no disbursement has begun yet from this trust. Meanwhile, American law firm Beasley Allen says it is representing over 100 families of the crash victims. The firm is preparing a lawsuit against Boeing. They have filed a Freedom of Information Act request with the US Federal Aviation Administration to obtain data from the aircraft's flight data recorder. According to Beasley Allen, Indian authorities have already shared this data with the FAA, and the lawsuit against Boeing will depend heavily on the evidence found in this data. Now, Beasley Allen also indicated that some families are preparing to file cases in the UK under the Montreal Convention, which governs airline liability in international air travel. Now, families will likely file individual cases within the next 4 weeks in the UK courts with Beasley Allen as their legal representative. However, not all families will qualify to claim compensation under the Montreal Convention. Families must demonstrate that the ticket was booked in the UK, the ticket was paid for in the UK, the deceased was a UK citizen or had clear intent to stay in the UK for the long term. Having a one-way ticket to the UK strengthens the claim as it suggests the intent of the deceased to stay for a longer period. The compensation amounts will differ family by family depending on individual cases and circumstances. Now, victims killed on the ground because of the crash and the 12 Air India crew members are not eligible under the Montreal Convention claims. So that is the update on the AI-17 crash so far.
Thank you, Madiha, for that. C.P. Radhakrishnan has been sworn in as the 15th Vice President of India and Chairman of Rajya Sabha. The 67-year-old was administered the oath by President Draupadi Murmu. The event was attended by top leaders including Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Home Minister Amit Shah and Defence Minister Rajnath Singh. Former Vice President Jagdeep Chhokar was also present, marking his first public appearance since his sudden resignation. Prime Minister Modi will visit Manipur tomorrow, or over 2 years after an ethnic violence swept the state. The Prime Minister is scheduled to announce new projects in Churachandpur, a Kuki stronghold, and Imphal, a Meitei majority region. The visit to Manipur is part of Modi's 3-day trip to northeastern states, Bihar and West Bengal. The Mumbai police has announced that the Elphinstone Bridge, a crucial connection between Parel and Prabhadevi, will be closed from midnight. This will be done to facilitate its demolition and make way for the Shevri-Worli elevated connector. The Mumbai Traffic Police has also issued a notification outlining several traffic diversions during the demolition. The bridge's closure is expected to cause significant impact to road traffic around the area. A founding member of the Association for Democratic Reforms and a pioneer of electoral reforms in India, Jagdeep Chhokar, has died of a heart attack at the age of 81. His organization led the fight to ensure politicians declare pending criminal cases and force the scrapping of electoral bonds through which political parties were getting opaque funding from corporations. Paytm aggregator and app-based lender BharatPe is getting ready to raise money from the public. It's lining up bankers and on track for a pre-IPO fundraise. CNBC TV 18's Rachna Dhanrajani reports that a comparison of BharatPe with its largest competitor and listed rival Paytm throws up an interesting question for investors.
BharatPe wants public money to fund its next stage of growth. Sources say it is lining up bankers for its upcoming IPO. CEO Nalin Negi has also confirmed that the company is on track to raise between 800 and 1200 crore rupees in a pre-IPO round. Sources tell me this exercise will value BharatPe at around 11.5 to 12 times its price to revenue. That's a smidge below the 20,000 crore rupee valuation mark it had enjoyed in 2021 when it last raised funds. Even this valuation of 20,000 crore rupees is far lower than that of its largest competitor and only listed peer, Paytm. However, as price to revenue multiples go, the 11.5 and 12x number is close to Paytm's 11x number as per its current market cap. But BharatPe has a feather in its cap that Paytm does not. It turned profitable in FY25, while Paytm, which is quadruple BharatPe's size, managed that only in the first quarter of FY26. BharatPe also did this quicker after only 7 years of operations. It took Paytm 15 years to get there. The contrast doesn't end there. Paytm outstrips BharatPe across a host of parameters. Interestingly, both run off the same playbook of QR codes, POS and sound boxes, but the plays they prefer to run are far from identical. Interestingly, both run off the same playbook of QR codes, POS and sound boxes, but the plays they prefer to run are far from identical. In addition, BharatPe is banking on its recently acquired RBI approval to operate as a payment aggregator to accelerate growth. We learned that it is also in advanced talks to raise an additional $80 to $100 million from its existing investor, Court Management. And this will aid in stronger and wider presence in tech deployment. If all these measures fructify, BharatPe will approach Dalal Street as a leaner, merchant-focused, profitable fintech. And experts say this will leave investors with a big question. What's most important, profitability at a smaller scale or size or growth prospects? In Mumbai, I'm Rachna Dhanrajani.
And with that, it's a wrap on this edition of India Business Hour. Thank you for watching. News continues right here on CNBC TV 18.